So welcome everyone to our the session I'm calling Liberation Through Non-Clinging. And it's a continuation of um, the, the series on dependent origination or dependent co-arising. So in the first session, we really looked at what dependent co-arising is and how really we misperceive. We don't perceive these 12 links of dependent origination, this dependent co-arising, how everything is interconnected. Everything is dependent on everything else. And then we talked about ignorance, which I also called a misperception. So we're basically kind of living according to an illusion, as opposed to the way things truly are. And how the direct path is simply seeing through that misperception and perceiving things the way they truly are, that everything's connected, interconnected, that there's no little me, ego, me, self, whatever you want to call it, kind of at the controls behind and in control of everything that's happening. And if we can just see that and have that perceptual shift, we're free. And that's why it's called the direct path. And that path is always there. It's not like it's separate from the insight meditation teachings, which also teach a gradual path, a path of purification. The direct path is also taught in the Pali Canon, the canon of the Theravadan Buddhists, which is the root text for the insight meditation. So it's contradictory. There's that direct path always available, as well as this gradual path. So now we're talking more about the gradual path, you could say, when we start looking at all the other links. As I said before, if you shift your perception and no longer live in the illusion, then that's it. You don't need to really delve into the other 11 links. They just kind of look after themselves. You're no longer clinging and craving. They just kind of look after themselves, because the truth is self-evident. So we're looking at the other 11 links in the chain that I mentioned last week. And really, if you look at those 12 links, there's consciousness, name, and form. There's all these things that are basically in contact. They're basically summarizing what your experience is, that you have these things that are out there. You become conscious of them. You give them names and labels and words. And then a feeling tone arises of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, based on your interaction with the world. And it's at that point where craving and then clinging arise. That's really where you need to be concerned with the rest of these links, is that craving and clinging, because that's where you can again step out of these links, the links of samsara, and step into the links of freedom. So name and form and ego consciousness and contact And feeling tone, pleasant and pleasant neutral, still arises, but there's no craving, no clinging, and therefore no rebirthing of the self. So you're not continually recreating this sense of a separate self. And in that, there's freedom. It sounds so simple, not necessarily so easy to do. So the, the Buddha summed it up very succinctly. Nothing whatsoever is to be clung to as I or mine. Whoever has heard this has heard all the teachings. Whoever has practiced this has practiced all the teachings. Whoever realizes this realizes all the teachings. Pretty direct. If you've heard it, practiced it, and realized it, realize it means you know it deep in your bones. If somebody comes along and tells you it's otherwise, you kind of go, whatever, you have your opinion. I know, I've realized this at a much deeper level, that whatever, nothing whatsoever is to be clung to as I or mine. Nothing whatsoever. It's kind of like my slogan from last week, allow everything to be as it is. It's the same kind of slogan, really, when you think about it. And it's this everything, or in this case, nothing whatsoever, that is the practice. It's just constantly digging and looking and seeing where there's stuckness, where there's clinging, reacting to what's arising. I've been doing this slogan thing. That's it's not much the Buddha's slogan, that one, but that's a good one. Nothing whatsoever is clung to as I or mine. Another one I mentioned during the meditation was, it doesn't matter what you don't cling to. There's another one that we'll talk about. Doesn't matter what you don't cling to. Another one is, everything changes. In fact, that's a slogan from Suzuki Roshi. If I'm not mistaken, he was asked by a student who'd been coming to his classes at the San Francisco Zen Center for many years. And he said, I've been listening to your teachings and really hearing them and practicing them. And you know what, I just want one little slogan that I can carry around, because it's getting complicated. Can you just simplify it, and something that'll really help me, grasp what I'm supposed to be looking at? And he said, he gave him 2 words: everything changes. When you think about it, those are really related. If everything changes, why would you possibly want to cling to anything? So we saw that in the meditation. I kind of wove your awareness of just allowing things to be as they are, with noticing how everything's changing. And of course, if you grasp onto anything, it's kind of like trying to grab fire or trying to grab water in a stream, and control it. You just get burnt, or a wet hand, I guess. The other slogan is, and this is one Joseph Goldstein, actually, he was asked the same question: can you summarize the teachings in one phrase or sentence? And he said, anything can happen anytime. Anything can happen anytime. And if you've meditated long enough, you are really, even not, and just contemplating and seeing what's arising moment to moment, you see that that's so true. So I'm going to actually skip through link 2, the volitional formations, which are the mental activities, consciousness, which is the ego consciousness that sees I am conscious of something that's in my experience, the name and form, the labeling, the 6 sense bases, which you're all familiar with, the 5 senses plus the mind, and contact, which we've talked about, which is basically all your experience is contact between an object and a sense organ. So a sound is a sound out either internally or externally, and you hear it, and you're conscious of it. It becomes an experience. It's conscious contact with the world. And from that, you have feeling tone, Vedana, pleasure, pain, or indifference, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Then the suffering starts. So you can have all that. That's fine. Everybody's going to have all that stuff. The Buddha, every awakened being has those things always occurring, because you're a body with the senses interacting with the world. So that's all going to happen. Then you have craving and clinging. And wanting to have, or wanting to destroy or get rid of. And that's really what we're going to explore. How this wanting turns into a real clinging, kind of grasping or attachment to what we've decided we want more of or we want less of. We get into some kind of mental preoccupation with how this can occur. So this is the 9th link, this clinging, the 9th link in the chain. And 2 places where the chain can be stepped out of, or some people say broken, is either at the link of craving or the link of clinging. So at the point where a pleasant feeling turns to craving, or at the point where craving leads to clinging. So with the link of craving, you can be aware of its dangers and the insight where it can lead us. And at the link of clinging, you can let go. You can also see the impermanence. So when we say, let go, really we're saying is, non-clinging. Letting go is simply non-clinging. And we see that what it is that frees the mind and heart through this process of non-clinging. The Buddha called it the supreme state of sublime peace. So I love the words of the way that freedom can be described. Usually he uses words that are like, unborn. He uses the negative because he doesn't want to make it conceptual, and then because the mind will then grasp on, a supreme state of sublime peace. I want that. Of course, then clinging. I'm meditating. I want that supreme state of sublime peace. That just sounds so wonderful, and to be way better than this confused, agitated body, mind. So it's rare that he uses a phrase like that. As I said, it's usually a non this or non that. But the supreme state of sublime peace has been discovered, namely liberation through non-clinging. So really all the teachings really converge on this and are in service of non-clinging. Right? So you've kind of got you've got your direct path where you shift your perception and see that you're not separate, that all things are interconnected. And then you've got this more gradual path where you just slowly see where you're clinging and how that's causing suffering, and how when you're not clinging, there is peace and ease. And the mind just slowly breaks out of the old habits where there's clinging and starts to see that, there's really peace in not clinging. And it takes time because, you know what, we're not convinced for the most part that clinging is a bad thing. Especially if you're just hearing me tell you it, you kind of go, you know what, this clinging, I get a fair bit out of it. No, I cling to something and kind of works out for me sometimes. And when it doesn't work out, it's somebody's fault. So you've got this ready-made kind of escape hatch. It's usually not your fault. It's usually somebody else's fault, but depending on your personality, it could be your fault as well. But so it's this clinging thing kind of works for me. I really strived for this and clung to it, and I got a lot of pleasure and a lot of satisfaction out of it. And that's true. I mean, one time out of 10, that probably happened, and the other 9, then you blame somebody, and so everything seems fine. But if you're on this path, you've sensed some kind of deeper disquiet or deeper. Well, you're not buying that kind of thinking. You're seeing that for the most part, it causes stress, dissatisfaction, unease in our lives. And that in those moments where there's not clinging, that you can actually see a real sense of ease and a real sense of wisdom, a real sense of clarity in ability to then, act and move in the world. So non-clinging, it's available now. Non-clinging, it's not some far off thing. Well, if I practice enough, if I listen to this Stephen guy talk enough, and and I sit on my cushion enough and throw in a couple of retreats, then maybe someday I'll get it, and you maybe even have it marked in your calendar on 2030, Freedom Day or something. This is when I'm going to get it. But the practice is available. It's all available now in the present moment. So the idea is not to cling to anything as I or mine now. Right now. Not in the next moment, or don't worry about the last moment. It's just in the now. So that unfolding of your experience that's continually changing. Just noticing that flow, being in that flow, being a kind of in the stream. The Buddha often used the metaphor of the stream. So being in flowing with the stream. So what we're practicing is a mind that is not clinging now. It doesn't matter what you're not clinging to. So one doorway to this is refining our awareness and perception of impermanence. That everything changes, as Suzuki Roshi said when asked to summarize his teachings. So really refining this awareness, really seeing it at a deep level. I mean, we all kind of know that intellectually that things change, right? I've got a car in the driveway that's rusting. I can see that it's changing and aging, and we can see our bodies aging. We see that at an intellectual level. This is seeing at a much more refined level, a much more intimate level, not conceptually, but seeing it and integrating it, this knowing into our lives. If we know this in our bones, if we know this as a deep realization, we won't cling. So it really is a doorway to non-clinging. Matthew Flickstein, when I was meeting with him, and he was my teacher, took me to see his teacher, Bhante Gunaratana, who's he's got a monastery in West Virginia. And it was quite an experience to be taken by your teacher to see his teacher, and how he just the way they interacted, and seeing that interaction. And he gave, there were a group of kind of teacher trainees, and he gave us a little meditation and a little talk in his back room. And he really emphasized this deep seeing of impermanence. Because there's the kind of the three marks. Seeing dukkha or suffering, seeing anicca, impermanence, and seeing anatta or not self. Those are kind of the three marks of existence or reality. He really honed in on this impermanence and refining our seeing of impermanence as a doorway to non-clinging, and then therefore a doorway to freedom. And really pointed out how all experiences come out of causes and conditions that are constantly changing. All experiences are coming out of these causes and conditions that just flow and that are constantly changing due to other causes and conditions. So there's just this impermanent, constant movement and flow in life. There's constant movement, constant beginnings and endings, constant beginnings, remainings, and endings. And therefore, anything can happen at any time, to use Joseph Goldstein's slogan. And non-clinging is accepting this. Why would you cling to something that is constantly changing based on causes and conditions that you mostly have no control over, no effect? So you're just basically not holding on to anything, or you're letting go. So you're looking to see impermanence, you're really looking deeply at your experience. So you're being continuously mindful, moment to moment. And not this, I remember we talked about this kind of mindful. It's, you're kind of mindful, you're kind of present. It's not that kind of awareness, or more or less mindful. It's really seeing things changing in every moment. Seeing the nuanced changes, or as some people say, being intimate. So if you take a sound, I'll create a sound here. Being deeply present with all the aspects of that sound. It's not just a single sound. I'll do it again. Being deeply present to the minutia of what's happening. So we may hear such a sound, and what may occur is, oh, there's a bell, and then the mind moves on. Or that would be just kind of I don't want to say mindless, but non-mindful. The other may be more or less mindful. It could be, oh, there's sound. I'm aware that there's sound. You're more or less mindful. And there to really hear the sound at that finer level, you're hearing how the sound shifts from moment to moment. How the sound is never the same. There's always these little shifts in the way the sound appears and disappears, appears and disappears, fades. Even in the fading, there's little ups and downs. So you're seeing impermanence, not at that gross level, but at that very subtle, very, very subtle moment to moment level. We can see this in a single breath. Not just an in-breath and an out-breath, but seeing how the breath, the sensations of the breath shift and change minutely. That moment to moment to moment to moment to moment. So it's more than even seeing things change moment to moment. We hear that a lot, right? It's more than that. It's things change within each moment to moment. Okay, so that's one practice I would invite you to explore this week, is really refining awareness of impermanence, really delving into the deep sense of impermanence. I'm going to read a quote here from Ajahn Sumedho. It's from the introduction. He wrote the introduction to this book called The Island. And then this is an excerpt from my reading glasses. It's very small print. Okay, in meditation, people often start with a basic delusion that they never challenge. The idea that I'm someone who grasps and has a lot of desires, and I have to practice in order to get rid of these desires and stop grasping and clinging to things. I shouldn't cling to anything. That's often the position we start from. So when we start our practice from this basis, and many times the result is disillusionment and disappointment, because our practice is based on the grasping of an idea. When I started practicing meditation, I felt I was somebody who was very confused, and I wanted to get out of this confusion and get rid of my problems and become someone who is not confused, someone who is a clear thinker, someone who would maybe one day become enlightened. So we have this mistaken idea, or this grasping, it's based on a grasping of an idea that we're someone who clings a lot, and we have to get rid of this. I could relate to that. We come to this practice because we sense something. We sense dukkha, some dissatisfaction. So in some ways, it inspires us to practice, and it brings us to the practice. But it can also be an impediment. We can think we need to get something out of our meditation practice. And we put in all this effort. We perhaps get up earlier in the morning to meditate. We spend Thursday evenings sitting in front of an iPad or a computer listening to a meditation when, we could be, well, we can't say a lot of things because with the pandemic, there's not a whole lot else we can do. You could be out for a walk or having a glass of wine or, watching Netflix. I don't know. We put in all this effort, so we want something out of it. And we can spend a lot of time trying to get, a special experience out of this. But the value in the practice is not in any special experience. It's really just in the letting go. And this can be one of the hardest things to get in this practice. Nothing whatsoever should be clung to. This includes non-clinging. This includes the idea that I shouldn't have desires, or I shouldn't be grasping. We can grasp onto that idea. And again, we may have special experiences in our practice, and they can be delightful. We can have bliss. We talked about bliss and tranquility as two of the factors of awakening. These can feel delightful and inspiring. So they're not a problem. They are to be dwelled in. But often we try to recreate them. We try to and have this idea that we want them back. And I think I've told this story when I was practicing in India. I was meditating a lot, either doing yoga or meditating pretty much all the time. And I had this real, this special experience, let's call it that. This feeling of this sort of open Buddha mind that can accept and be with anything. And it was blissful, enjoyable. And I spent a month trying to recreate it, which was absolute misery and suffering. It took a month of sitting there trying to figure out how I could get that experience back before I realized the suffering I was creating in trying to recreate that experience. Trying to make something happen that's different from the present moment, different from what's just arising. So some causes and conditions came together that caused that Buddha mind to arise. And just being able to flow with that and realize that's the past. Now I'm in the next present moment. Trying to make something happen that's different is clinging. And when we do this, our focus goes to content and feeling tone. I was looking for, what did I do? What was I doing? Where was I sitting? How was I sitting? What did I eat? How much sleep did I get? Who did I talk to? It's amazing what the mind will do on a long, long retreat. But yeah. Okay. Yeah. So freedom's not about having anything in a particular way or having any particular experience. Rather, it's about non-clinging to any particular way or to any particular experience, including non-clinging, including enlightenment, whatever that idea may have conjured up in your mind. It's just allowing everything to be as it is. So practicing to meet the flow of life just as it is. I heard a Dharma teacher, Temple Smith, wonderful teacher, saying life is like a stream, but we have the mistaken view that we are on land. I hadn't heard that before. Life is like a stream, but we have the mistaken view that we're on land. So when stress arises, what do? Our default may be, and our old habits may be, we try to solve the stress. But I invite you to turn towards it, to recognize it and accept it, and then see what arises. Doesn't mean you just live with whatever happens to you. We've talked about this before. It's not passive resignation, because there's wise action that flows from that place of recognizing and acknowledging and accepting what's arising in the present moment, or surrendering. Eckhart Tolle calls it surrendered action. So we're intimate with the flow of life, free from our beliefs about it, and free from who we think we are or who we think we want to be, what experiences we want. When we're not intimate with the world, we see it as static and believe we can find happiness by controlling it, interfering with it. So when you're intimate with life, you actually see non-permanence. Impermanence becomes self-evident. Okay, I'll leave it there and leave some time for questions, comments. Oh, and Isabel, we have this thing that we do where we go like this before we speak and when we're finished. speaking.
So Stephen, is the act of unclinging, is it an act that's volitional, like, versus kind of watching? I'm just trying to think of it, like, I mean, because a lot of the practice seems to be a bit of both, of like um, there's the act of, like, you sit and you watch things go by, but you actually have to kind of make some effort. It's almost like trying to tune the string on a guitar, so you have to kind of make sure that it's properly done. I'm just wondering whether the unclinging clinging is like that as well.
Well, you could, there's definitely energy and effort, that balanced effort, wise effort that, that you referred to at the tuning of a lute or guitar, not too tight, not too loose. So an effort that's kind of just right, just balanced. In terms of being intimate with life and being aware, that continuous awareness takes that kind of balanced effort. To say that it's volitional, it's intentional, I would say. It's an intention, and you intentionally you are intentionally aware, continuously aware, because that's really what non-clinging is, right? It's seeing impermanence, seeing how suffering is created moment to moment, and through clinging, and seeing how non-suffering and seeing impermanence moment to moment. Yeah.
Stephen, it seems to me that sort of in ordinary life, we often spend a lot of time planning or preparing for pleasant experiences. It might be you're thinking, I want to go for a walk later in the day. You're sort of almost enjoying thinking about going, and then there's an enjoyment when you go, or you're thinking of having a dinner with friends, whether you're preparing it or going to a restaurant, and there's effort that goes into planning for that and thinking about it, and there's a certain enjoyment even in the process of doing that. And I'm wondering, is that necessarily clinging or craving when one is doing that kind of thing? Or is it really a question of whether you can let go if it doesn't work out? Like, you're thinking of the walk and then there's a thunderstorm and you can't go, or you go to a restaurant and they make terrible food, or someone's sick or something. I'm just wondering how that kind of normal kind of time spent preparing and planning for pleasant events fits with craving and clinging.
Yeah. So it's not it's not the content of our lives for the most part that causes the suffering. It's the clinging, it's our relationship to the content. So you pointed to the answer when you said, is it our attachment to the outcome of what we've planned? So, you engage in some practical planning, right? Which we've talked about in terms of the planning that it's occurring. The mind, 10% of the time is doing very practical, necessary things to help navigate the world. The other 90% of the time, it's creating suffering. Those stats are kind of made up, but it's from my experience of this mind. This is kind of the ballpark, and I've talked to enough people that's probably pretty accurate description. So you're doing that 10% that planning. It's then so you go into the event. Are you attached then to all those details? You might go to the restaurant and find out it's closed. How do you relate to that? So it's your relationship then to the outcome. And you mentioned, the meal's bad and so on. So those are all examples of, anything can happen anytime. So you can really watch your emotional reaction to what happens anytime. And if there is an emotional reaction, like not wanting something to happen, or anger, or then there's clinging present. I mean, you can really see clinging in your emotional reactions to the world, to the content of your experience. You're really, part of this practice, a big part is exploring your emotional reactions and getting to know them, right? Yeah, so all that enjoyment still goes on. It's, renunciation doesn't mean we stop doing things. It means we really examine our relationship to what we're doing. This is how I practice. I mean, there are some who may say it's to simplify one's life as part of the practice. And that's kind of, simplifying allows you to perhaps be more intimate with what is happening, because it's not so chaotic and there's not so much movement. It's easier to see what movement there is when there's less of it. That's what we do when we meditate, is we kind of simplify life and so that we can see the movement. Or it's like if you learn when we taught our son how to drive, we taught him in the parking lot where there's a little less going on, a little less movement. I kind of look at meditation as that. It's kind of learning to drive in the parking lot. And so there is a teaching around simplifying our life and not making it too much planning and too much going on. But that, of course, doesn't mean we don't enjoy life and do things that we find enjoyable. I'm finding I get more and more enjoyment out of just being, not having to be doing something all the time. There was a time when I had to be doing something, or I felt, a little uneasy. And that's just, me needing to distract myself from myself. So, yeah, we see that a lot, in the world. Yeah. And being aware that that's what's happening. again, bringing conscious awareness. If that's, it's not a problem. If that's what's happening, it's not a problem. It's not like, oh crap, now I got to stop distracting myself. I got to just be. No, it's just being. It's just noticing and being conscious, aware, and not clinging to anything. Just there's the craving arising for distraction. Noticing it arising. This is a really hard part of practice, and I don't. I hope I'm making it clear. This notion of not clinging to anything whatsoever. Yeah. Well, I was going to read a quote. Maybe I'll end with that. So it's Upasika Key. Upasika Key is an amazing Thai woman and a lay teacher. She died in 1978-ish, born in the early, like 1900, 1901. She was mostly self-taught. Makes her a very interesting woman in that era. One, to be a teacher, two, to be self-taught. And she's still not really recognized by mainstream Thai Buddhist sort of hierarchy because she wasn't monastic. And she and her teachings were seen as kind of different at the time, but they're just a wonderful collection of very direct and simple and clean teachings. There's no, it's a lay woman who self-taught, teaching other lay women for the most part how to practice and meditate. So here's a quote from her book. She's got a book. It's a collection of her teachings. Really, she didn't write books, but people recorded and wrote down her teaching. The book's called Pure and Simple. If you look into the pattern of the current of your thoughts, fabricating good and bad, you'll find that there's nothing you can latch onto as having any essence. For all these thoughts disband and disappear. If you learn how to look skillfully in this way, your mind will be empty more than embroiled. For you see the truth that these things all arise, remain, and pass away. The past has passed away. The future hasn't come yet. Look simply at the present arising and passing away right before your eyes. Don't latch on to it. When you see arising, remaining, and passing away, pure and simple, right in the present moment, and then you can let go. Right there is where you gain release. I like that. Look at the arising and passing away right before your eyes. Don't latch onto it. Pure and simple. Yeah, it's kind of sums up what I've been going on about for an hour. Pretty well. So that's the power of the illusion, of course, is, and the power of our old habits are strong, right? And so it's really we're seeing those and seeing how they create this chain of suffering, these linkages. Are there any questions? Anything burning in anybody's mind? Burning a hole? Just do it. The Pasika key says, pure and simple. See the arising, remaining, and passing away of everything. Don't latch on. Right before your eyes. Right before your eyes. I think that's in the present moment. Don't latch on. So seeing if you're latching on. Another practice. So the practice for the week is noticing the refining your awareness of impermanence. So you see every little minutia of change. And noticing if there's anything you're latching onto that's right before your eyes. If you do those two things for, I don't know, a week, maybe you'll be enlightened and I won't see you ever again. Or you can teach the course, teach the sessions. Anyway, it's all great to see you all again. Take care. I don't know what, maybe I'll do something next week on the power of illusion. That's something that just came out, because it is a very powerful illusion that we're trying to see through. And why is it so hard? It's so simple, but why is it so, why isn't it easy? Easier. Because it's available. So that's something I've been toying around with the last couple of days. Why is this illusion so powerful? Why do I keep falling for it? It doesn't get me that much when I do fall for it. I mean, I still fall in the hole in the sidewalk. Right? This hole's there and I still fall in it. I go, wow, that's amazing. I'm still falling in that hole. So yeah, power of illusion. Why is it so powerful, and how can we relate to that illusion to see through it? Good night, everyone. Well, not quite good night, but goodbye.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you,
Thank you, Stephen.
Good night, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Right.